Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another Game Informer review. This time we're talking about issue number 374 with the front cover being World of Warcraft, the Midnight expansion specifically. Non-specifically, I know nothing about World of Warcraft, so reading the cover story for this issue was very educational, Still not necessarily my thing, but I still think it was a good article nonetheless. But we're not just here to talk about good articles. We're here to talk about my 5 favorite articles from this issue, so let's get into it. So, kicking things off with the year in review by Charles Harte, one of my favorites. We had some Claire Obscure Blaze, so obviously had to call that one out. Oh, also, have my notes per usual in case y'all see me looking up and down. But yeah, Claire Obscure came out of nowhere. Well, not really nowhere, but at the same time, it hit in a way that nobody was expecting, I would say. That's where the came out of nowhere kind of came from, that comment I wrote. It blew everybody away, though. Blew everybody away. Also, the Switch 2 launched. So very, very big year for gamers. We also had a lot of craziness. The political side of things kind of spilling into gaming, at least in a more prominent way, with tariffs causing prices to increase, like having $80 games now, or the Switch 2 being the successor to the Switch 1, which was one of the most affordable modern consoles in a little while, and now Switch 2 is breaking that streak. But people still seem to be happy with it, so hopefully worth the bucks. But yeah, we also had subscription prices increase as well. A lot of increases. A lot more money is being dished out for this hobby, and so people have to make more. Some people are trying to make more informed decisions. Some people are. There's a lot of craziness. Anyway, back to the article. Also, some good news. The United Video Game Workers CWA union launched last year, so that's great. More of the industry needs to be unionized, and people need to be protected from all the mass layoffs that continue to happen. We just had Blue Point, as of recording. Blue Point was one of the last studios to be shut down and laid off because this industry is insane. But yes, we also had, speaking of insane, video games kind of like spilling into all different forms of media, whether that be news, movies, TV, etc. So obviously, we got the Last of Us show, the Fallout 2nd season. I just wrapped that up a couple of weeks ago. Liked it a lot. I'm very excited to see what season 3 has in store. We had the Minecraft movie, one of the biggest movies of last year. We also had the EA Saudi buyout, which that was a thing that happened. And we have a lot of political memes, none of which I personally enjoyed. Well, I won't say none, but the big ones I personally did not enjoy. Yeah, the industry crazy. Doug Bowser retired. That's also a thing. As of recording, Phil Spencer retired. The jury's out on that one. Crazy times. Crazy times. Next one is, I think might be the largest article in this issue, and definitely my favorite. Sorry, World of Warcraft. Which again, y'all should check out the article if y'all are interested in learning more about the history of World of Warcraft and new things about the expansion that just came out. But this one is my favorite, even though I'm not a big Souls player. But yes, to get into it, this is The Soul and Souls-like by Brian Shea. So we got to interview not only Miyazaki-san himself, but also other developers that have taken inspiration from Dark Souls and from software games in general, and kind of incorporated into their the games that they've created. So yes, to jump into things, I think it was interesting to hear Miyazaki-san's perspective on the From Software formula, and it's not something, and I've heard it, I forgot, but just the life, death, and rebirth being core gameplay loop which feels obvious when he's saying it out loud. And the fact that he also wants the player to be able to get feedback so they understand like what happened, what went wrong, if a boss kills them, and what they can do to like succeed next time, or just continue to get that feedback and iterate until you're finally able to win. So he wants every fight to be challenging but to be fair as well. So he's not trying to make people like pull their hair out and get stressed out and things like that. He just wants people to be able to have the satisfaction of like overcoming a great challenge. Which you definitely get that. You definitely get that. Sometimes I'm not sure if I want to put in all the stress to get the satisfaction, but in the times that I do, I do feel satisfied. Miyazaki also wanted to go multi-platform. So he started off with Demon Souls being a PlayStation exclusive, and then the next game that was created was Dark Souls, and I thought that was like interesting because you don't, or at least I haven't heard or read a lot about going from like being single platform to multi-platform and like the reasoning for that. And Miyazaki listed the reasoning basically just being wanting to expand the audience, reach more people, which ended up being very fruitful because he mentions later in the article that having all that feedback from the player base really helped define what the Souls-like genre is, and like different gameplay mechanics and kind of like what works and what doesn't. All the things. But then it was interesting that he talks about wanting to go multi-platform, but then went back to Sony to, of course, make Bloodborne, the game that has been trapped on, I think it's the PS3, for quite some time. And interesting stories have been coming out about that, actually, around like why Bloodborne hasn't been remade or anything like that. Some are saying that it might be because Miyazaki wants to make it himself but doesn't have time and doesn't want to like let go of that part of himself. And I think this article kind of brings a little more context to that, having like all this information kind of come together at this moment in time, because in the article he talks about Bloodborne, which might be on this page. Not like y'all can read this, but you know, I try to give y'all some good visuals. But Miyazaki-san talks about Bloodborne being a special game because of the developmental challenges that they had, but also because of how personal it was. So he was able to add stories, ideas for stories, world building, game mechanics, and game systems. So something that I guess he had a much greater control and a bigger hand in versus his other projects that he's directed. So that's something that's like really cool to hear for me. Saying that, you know, he worked on, this might have been his 4th or 5th game at this point. I could be totally wrong, but you know, he's had some experience basically, and then being given the opportunity to make his own game, and then to have the game be successful. All of that is very fortunate on Miyazaki's part, but also, you know, he put in a lot of hard work to get there. So it's just cool to see that, like, you know, someone was able to go all the way with their ideas and be successful too. Miyazaki-san also talked about being able to see other teams interpret the Souls genre, and even taking inspiration from other games that have taken on the Souls-like genre and kind of incorporated it into their games, or just in discussion within From Software, which I think is great. I think collaboration is something that the game industry is severely lacking in a way. I guess it's something I didn't think was necessary until I started seeing collaborations like Aggro Crab and Landfall, or I'm sure there's a billion, like Balatro, like shouting out other indie games and even other big franchises and things like that, or even coming up talking about Scott Pilgrim, the Scott Pilgrim game, and like referencing other games and different like nerd culture and things, and just being able to like show, I guess, some of your passions and what kind of brought you to where you are, because a lot of people can connect with that, and like it just brings people together, and it's really cool. Yeah, gaming's great sometimes. But I would love to see more game developers do collaborations and things like that, or be able to openly admit, like, oh yeah, I took inspiration from XYZ thing, and that people be like, oh my god, you're not original, blah, blah. There's like I'm of the belief that not a lot is original these days, but I think that's okay. I think it's okay to be inspired by something else, but you have to make it your own, you know. Anyways, speaking of collaborations, actually, for Elden Ring, they got to work with the famous writer George R.R. Martin to lay down the world-building foundation and develop backstories for the characters. And then Miyazaki-san's team turned the benevolent demigods that George R.R. Martin wrote about into grotesque, literally quote, grotesque creatures, end quote, that players get to see in the final game, which I think is very funny that he's like, yes, made these awesome, like, cool little demigod guys, and now we're gonna twist them up and make them crazy. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's this one. But yeah, once again, great collaboration. People really like Elden Ring. I think it's also, there's like some accessibility things at Elden Ring that make it really successful too. But George R. R. Martin, definitely something that brought some eyes to the game for sure. But Miyazaki-san credits Elden Ring's success ultimately, like I was saying earlier, to the audience feedback loop with each title that From Software has been able to put out. And something that I didn't necessarily think about before, but it's definitely noted, or something I noticed, is that From Software likes to experiment and try new things with the games. For example, going from Dark Souls to then trying out Bloodborne, to then trying out Sekiro after Dark Souls 3, I think it was, to now doing Elden Ring, trying an open world kind of thing, and then Elden Ring Night Rain, leading more into multiplayer, which is something that they hadn't done previously. Or even going back to Armored Core. Oh my gosh, I was trying to remember. Even going back to games like Armored Core, and now making Dustbloods, which is like another multiplayer title that From Software is like gaining more experience with doing multiplayer things. So I think that's really cool, and something that I would love to see more studios do. Just continuing to see these game developers innovate is always cool to me. Alright, then we got Finding Closure by Kyle Hilliard. And this is covering Scott Pilgrim EX, which if you're not following the Swiper Prime channel, I know there's lots of channels, but if you're not following the Swiper Prime channel, I actually did a demo disc for Scott Pilgrim EX. I had a lot of fun with it. You can definitely tell that Tribute Games, which was previously a team with Ubisoft, which is actually one of the things I wanted to comment on, you can tell that they were like the originators of the first game and how they, like, once again, continue to evolve on that gameplay loop and just what they've learned as developers, kind of bringing it into the modern age. Very fun, very fun. I don't know if the demo is still open outside of Next Fest, but I highly encourage y'all to check it out, wishlist it where you can. If you can download and play the demo, definitely do that. I think you'll have a great time. But digging into this, Finding Closure, Kyle Hilliard. Tribute Games, yet another team of people that Ubisoft could not keep a hold of, so they went on to go do great things without them. It's insane how often that happens, and in a way, like, I understand it, because I think Ubisoft does draw in like very great talents, because they have historically made very great games. They haven't made great decisions in recent times, in my opinion, and that's caused some of their great talent to move on to do great things without them. So it's unfortunate that all these people had to, like, you know, go make, well, I don't want to say unfortunate in the sense that, like, oh, indie games are bad or anything like that, but like, think of what they could have made with like a AAA budget if that was what they desired to do. If not, totally cool. But yeah, Ubisoft. We also have Brian O'Malley is heavily involved with this game, which is great to hear. Always good to hear that the original creator of the IP is involved in some kind of way, and to hear that Brian O'Malley is like heavily involved, looking at different gameplay mechanics, character design, even writing a new Scott Pilgrim comic to go along with the physical release of the game, which I had no idea before reading this, so I definitely have to pick up the physical, because I will be playing this. 100% I will be playing this. But that's all very cool to hear, and like very I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know, I'm just happy that Bidaut Valley is a part of the team, and also trying to do things a little bit differently than they did with Scott Pilgrim, the video game movie tie-in. Since they were happy with the development for that, but it was also rushed because they wanted to tie it in with the movie's release, so they had to compromise on some things. So I'm glad they could kind of tribute games, or the team that makes up tribute games that also originally worked on the first game, and Brian O'Malley can come back together to kind of make the dream game that they couldn't back in the day. So that's really dope. Speaking of making the dream game, this is not a direct sequel to that Scott Pilgrim video game tie-in, or video game movie tie-in, which isn't too surprising. I think everything we've seen since that game has been in some way like iterative, in the sense that we're continuing to explore this world, but we're not necessarily continuing the story. If you've seen the anime Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, which is really great. Not just from like animation perspective, but story perspective, everything. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out, especially if you're a Scott Pilgrim fan. But yeah, it's not like the movie or the. I haven't read the comic actually, but yeah, it's not close to the movie or the original source material as I know it. Which again, with the iteration and the evolution, I like to see that even though, you know, they have this great foundation, they're not just trying to like push out the same thing. They want to, you know, explore new things, make some new lore with this game, where Scott and Ramona are friends with the evil exes now, and now the villain that they're trying to face is Metal Scott, which is inspired by I think it's Metal Sonic and like Proto Man and Mega Man 3 specifically. So yeah, it's cool that the video game inspirations are still there. Obviously, let me see. On the last page, you can see like a turtle shell and the band name being Sex Bomb, like Mario Bomb and all that. It's very fun, very cool. It's interesting that you get to, they mention, which this was not in the demo, but they mentioned being able to pick up the guitar, and I guess you learn like a melody from one of the characters, and then you have to play that melody to get access to different areas. And I thought that was interesting because it's definitely reminiscent of Ocarina of Time. And I'm like, has any other game really done that? Any other game that's not a Zelda game? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. But yes, Scott Pilgrim takes Scott Pilgrim, yes. Next one we got is the Seoul Shogunate preview, written by Marcus Stewart, one of my other favorite writers for Game Informer. And I wanted to highlight this because this kind of came out of nowhere when it was revealed at the Game Awards. And outside of this article, I haven't really heard anything since, but I'm still very intrigued and am hoping to know more, maybe at Summer Game Fest. But to give y'all a rundown of some of the interesting things that I noted. So, Seoul Shogunate is supposed to be a samurai space opera, and it's developed by Chaos Manufacturing. To me, this definitely sounds like a Watanabe, kind of like Samurai Champloo or Cowboy Bebop kind of game. I don't know if that's not accurate, but that's the feeling I'm getting. And they listed a bunch of different inspirations from a ton of different media, but gaming wise, specifically they mentioned Metal Gear Rising, Final Fantasy 16, so that's actually pretty recent. And they also listed some different, or just music in general, kind of, and tying music, or how tightly woven music is into this game, which is interesting. But the story, humans have colonized the moon, plus a samurai revenge tale, so I guess stuff goes down on the moon. The game director, and sorry, I am probably gonna butcher this, Lazik Sespansky says music is woven into this game, so each battle is like an action music video. So it sounds like it's going to be some interactive music playing. I'm very curious to see and hear more from this. Marcus says we probably won't get any kind of release until 2027 at the earliest. So yeah, we got some time to wait, but also some time to maybe hear some more details. And the last article to close things out is Crawl Out Through the Fallout by Brian Shea. So this is a retrospective on Fallout as a video game franchise, but also talking about a little bit of the show and just where Bethesda and specifically Todd Howard sees Fallout going in the future, kind of prioritization, things like that. I guess not really where it's going in the future, but just they're excited for the future of Fallout. I definitely recommend y'all read this if y'all are interested in the history of Fallout or just never read it before, because I didn't know anything about it until reading this article, and I found it very interesting. I just love seeing how things kind of come together. That's definitely a pattern for me. But to get into the comments, I wrote that it was wild that this franchise started as programmer Tim Kane's kind of underground side project, and that he was able to recruit people literally through like little break room pizza parties since he wasn't supposed to do it as an like official work project at Interplay Productions. Wasn't supposed to officially recruit people. So it was supposed to be like a little side thing, like, hey, come to the pizza party on the side, I can tell you about my game. And so artist Leonard Boyarsky, sorry if I mispronounced that, was one of the attendees of the, I don't even want to say famous pizza party because that sounds like something else, but at one of these gatherings for the game. And he was very intrigued and got pulled into the idea and created the Vault Boy, actually. And that helped ground this kind of retro future iconography that the entire franchise has, which is pretty cool. So see, collaboration. So Tim Kane and Leonard Boyarsky wanted to put an emphasis on having RPG skills being able to affect the way that you converse with the world and with the NPCs, with the environment, and also how it affects combat and the ways that you engage. And they didn't say this was revolutionary in the articles. I don't know if maybe somebody else was doing it, but that feels pretty big to me. And there's definitely other games that have implemented a system like that, but it's definitely very unique and not something that you see super often. Another thing I noted, when Bethesda got the rights to Fallout much later in time, they were working on Fallout 3, and that's when they created the VAT system. So the first two Fallout games, they wanted to use the GURPS system, which I know all this sounds crazy. If you've not read the article or don't know a lot about game development, honestly, I don't know a lot about game development, but the GURPS system was kind of similar to what I had mentioned previously, using skills throughout the world and to change your interactions. The person that made the GURPS system didn't like how violent Fallout was turning to be, so they had to make a different system, and that system, which was similar, and that system ended up being the special system. Then, when Bethesda got the rights to Fallout 3, they wanted to adapt that system to their first-person action-based style that they kind of developed when creating when creating Elder Scrolls. So with the success of Fallout 3, Bethesda wanted to keep the momentum going, but they already had another game in the pipeline, which was another Elder Scrolls game. So to keep the momentum going while also having the Bethesda team work on Elder Scrolls, they turned to what became Obsidian Entertainment, or what was Obsidian Entertainment, which was basically made up of old Black Isle developers. And Black Isle is a group of developers that also worked on the original 2 Fallouts. There's a lot of different development teams and companies and stuff where these people moved around, but TLDR, Obsidian Entertainment, is made up of a lot of people that made the original first 2 Fallout games. And that is how we got Fallout New Vegas. One of the best Fallouts, a lot of people had said. And I think that's really cool that they went back to that team and said, like, hey, we want to make another game. We're not able to, but we will give you the resources, because they gave them the game system from Fallout 3 to have it as a foundation to like build a new game like release it, all this stuff. It's it makes me feel a little sad that Blue Point didn't get that same opportunity, because I know that they were really pushing, or at least so it's been said, that they were pushing to create a Bloodborne remake of some sort, or just have a Bloodborne related project. And there was also talks about God of War, different things like that. They were a great studio, so obviously, you know, I think they deserved more, even if it was their pitch was somehow terrible or something. But yeah, at least at this point in time, it was cool for game developers to get a shot to come back to something, or to be able to iterate on a franchise and kind of just see where the chips fell at the end of the day. But yeah. And then my last little point, which is perfectly encapsulates the whole collaboration note. The Fallout shelters and base building idea from Fallout 4 actually came from an internal game jam. I don't know if that's a super common practice among people in the industry either, but I love that they were encouraging developers to like just experiment with the game, make different like game mechanics and things that they personally wanted to see, even if it doesn't make it into the game. At least everybody gets to see it and think about it and be like, oh, maybe that would be cool, or oh, maybe not like this but like that. So yeah, very, very cool. But that is going to do it for this issue of Game Informer. I know I'm like slowly running behind, so as soon as I get finished recording this, I'm literally going to start the February issue that it's been sitting in my apartment for about a week. But if you can, please go back to the January issue and let me know what some of your favorite articles were. And for the year in review, what were some of the favorite games that you played? I'm curious. I know for me, it was Clear Obscure, but having finished Ghost of Yotei, that was also an excellent game as well. So I'm curious what y'all have played and maybe what you're playing right now this year. People are saying Resident Evil 9 Requiem, or however you want to say it, is a runner-up already, and we are just entering March as of time of recording. So I'm liking it so far. I've only played an hour, but I'm liking it. I can't confirm or deny, but I'm not inclined to disagree. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit the like button. It helps recommend this video to more people like yourself so they can join the community by subscribing. And until next time, hope you guys have a nice evening, morning, night. Always enjoy it. I'll see you the next time. Peace.